Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my talk today. The Filipino people, how our race evolved from the Stone Age to 2026. A DNA story. I will speak for about 30 minutes, but with the extra details you've asked for on historical events, we'll dive even deeper. Think of it as twice the depth on each era, with more stories, timelines, key figures, and how these events shape genetic mixes. I'll keep it in clear chapters for easy following, using simple English, short sentences, and real-life examples from history, culture, and modern life. We'll go from the oldest times all the way to the present, tying DNA changes to big historical moments like migrations, trades, wars, revolutions, and global shifts. Special focus on recent changes, and yes, Chinese ancestry gets a bigger spotlight as a key thread. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The very first Filipinos, Negritos and Denisovans, 50,000 plus years ago. Let's start at the very beginning, way back in the Paleolithic era. More than 50,000 years ago. Picture this. The Earth was in a deep ice age, with massive ice sheets covering much of the northern hemisphere, locking up so much water that global sea levels dry over 100 meters. This exposed huge land bridges, creating vast continents where oceans now stand. One of these was Sundaland, a massive, now submerged landmass connecting what we know as Indonesia, Malaysia, Borneo, and the Philippines directly to mainland Asia. It acted like a superhighway for early humans who had migrated out of Africa around 70,000 years ago, trekking through the Middle East, India, and Southeast Asia in search of food and safer lands. The first people to reach the Philippines were the Negritos, indigenous groups with distinct physical features. Short stature, often under 5 feet tall, dark skin tones adapted to intense sun, and curly hair for heat regulation. DNA studies from institutions like the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology and the University of Uppsala reveal they arrived in at least 2 primary waves. The northern Negritos, ancestors of modern groups like the Ada in Zambales province or the Agda in northeastern Luzon, diverged from a basal Sundaland population around 46,000 years ago. Meanwhile, the southern Negritos branched off from broader Oceanian lineages about 37,000 years ago. These early settlers were skilled hunter-gatherers, living in small nomadic bands of 20 to 50 people, using rudimentary stone tools like flakes and choppers to hunt now extinct megafauna such as dwarf elephants, stegodons on Luzon, or giant rats in Palawan caves. They gathered wild tubers, fruits like durian and rambutan from the lush tropical forests, and fished in rivers with spears. Archaeologically, this era is marked by key discoveries that tie into their story. In 2007, archaeologists unearthed the Calao Cave Gayanman and found, dated 87,000 years ago, the oldest human remains in the Philippines. This find, analyzed by the University of the Philippines Anthropological Team, shows early Homo sapiens mixed with possible archaic influences, supporting the DNA narrative. Another site, Tabon Caves in Palawan, dated 47,000 to 30,000 years ago, revealed burial practices with red ochre and tools, hinting at early spiritual beliefs, perhaps rituals to honor the dead, which Negrito cultures still practice today with shamanistic dances. But here's where the story turns fascinating, almost like a prehistoric romance. These early Filipinos didn't just survive in isolation, they interbred with an extinct human species called Denisovans. Denisovans were archaic humans, cousins to Neanderthals but uniquely adapted to Asia's diverse environments, from Siberian caves to island highlands. We know them primarily from a pinky finger bone discovered in Denisova Cave in Siberia in 2010, but their genetic legacy persists in modern populations. In the Philippines, this intermixing occurred independently, right on the archipelago's islands, separate from similar events in Papua New Guinea or Australia. The Ada Magbukan people who today inhabit the remote, forested mountains of Bataan Peninsula carry the highest Denisovan ancestry globally, approximately 5% of their genome. That's higher than the 3–4% found in Papuans. Why this high level? The Ada's long-term isolation in rugged terrain minimized later genetic dilutions from incoming migrants, preserving this ancient signal. To break down the DNA simply, imagine your genome as a massive family cookbook passed down through generations. The Denisovan recipes likely added practical adaptations, such as enhanced immunity to tropical parasites like malaria, or better oxygen processing for high-altitude living, traits that could explain why Negrito groups excel in mountainous, disease-prone areas. A 2021 study in Current Biology led by Maximilian Lorena, analyzed over 1,000 Filipino genomes, and confirmed multiple Denisovan admixture events, emphasizing the Philippines as a hotspot for human evolution. Historically, this period lacked written records, but oral histories from Negrito elders speak of ancient giants, or spirit ancestors, possibly folk memories of Denisovans. Today, Negritos comprise only about 0.03% of the Philippine population, around 30,000 people, but they are vital guardians of biodiversity in protected areas like the Sierra Madre. Their traditions, such as the Ada's expert bow and arrow hunting or communal epic storytelling around campfires, directly echo this ancient lifestyle. Without acknowledging these roots, we'd lose a crucial piece of global human history, reminding us that evolution started with survival and adaptation in a volatile world. Chapter 2. Small additions from Papua and post-Ice Age shifts, 25,000 to 15,000 years ago. For thousands of years after the initial settlements, life in the Philippines remained relatively stable but challenging. The world was still gripped by the last glacial maximum around 20,000 to 25,000 years ago, when temperatures plummeted and much of the northern world was uninhabitable. Yet, the Philippine Islands served as a tropical refuge, with dense rainforests providing shelter and food amid global climate turmoil. Populations were small, perhaps just a few thousand across the archipelago, living in harmony with nature, but vulnerable to volcanic eruptions like those from Taal or Pinatubo ancestors and mega-tsunamis from ancient earthquakes. Around 25,000 years ago, we detect the first subtle external gene flow, a trickle from Papuan-related populations originating in New Guinea and nearby Melanesia. This wasn't a massive invasion or conquest, rather, it likely involved occasional seafaring voyages, perhaps drift canoes carried by currents or intentional exploratory trips across the narrowing seas. DNA evidence from large-scale projects like the Human Genome Diversity Project and the 1000 Initiative identifies this Papuan ancestry in southern Philippine ethnic groups, such as the Sangil in Sarangani Province, the Blan in South Cotabato, and subgroups of the Manobo in Mindanao. It accounts for about 2 to 5% of their genetic makeup, adding layers of Oceanian diversity that differentiate southern Filipinos from their northern counterparts. What historical events facilitated this? The end of the Ice Age around 15,000 years ago brought rising seas, flooding Sundaland and transforming the Philippines into its current size 1,040 one-island form. This great flood, echoed in global myths like Noah's Ark, forced adaptations. Some groups retreated to higher grounds, others developed better watercraft. Archaeological sites like the Sohoton Cave in Samar, dated 20,000 years ago, show early boat-building evidence, with shell middens and fish hooks suggesting increased maritime activity. Papuan influences might have introduced new technologies, such as outrigger canoes or advanced fishing nets, enhancing survival. Culturally, era saw the emergence of early artistic expressions. The Angono petroglyphs in Rizal Province, though precisely dated to around 3000 BCE, have precursors in older rock art traditions that depict hunting scenes and spiritual figures, possibly shamanistic rituals involving animal spirits or fertility dances. Negrito oral traditions, like the Agda's tales of CP people arriving with gifts, could reference these Papuan contacts. No large societies formed yet. Life was about resilient family clans navigating environmental upheavals, from the Younger Dryas cold snap, 12,900 to 11,700 years ago that briefly reversed warming, to the final sea rise that isolated islands. This period's genetic shifts were subtle but foundational, setting the stage for diversity. Today, southern groups like the Lan preserve these traces in their beadwork and music, which blend Austronesian rhythms with Melanesian beats, a living testament to ancient exchanges. Chapter 3. New East Asian hunters arrive and early diversification 15,000 to 8,000 years ago. As the post-Ice Age accelerated around 15,000 years ago, the world entered the Holocene epoch, our current geological era. Seas continued rising, but this also opened new migration routes via improving climates and receding glaciers in Asia. New waves of people from East Asia began arriving, either over lingering land bridges or in primitive dugout canoes, driven by population pressures or resource searches in mainland China and Taiwan. First, around 15,000 years ago, came the ancestors of Manobo people, who today inhabit the highlands of central Mindanao, and are known for their intricate weaving Tinalac cloth from abaca fibers, and epic oral chants like the Ula Hingan, which recount ancient journeys. Their DNA traces back to basal East Asian sources, intermixing with local Negritos to create hybrid communities. Simultaneously, the Sama Bajau ancestors arrived, the legendary sea gypsies, or Bajau, who still live on stilt houses or houseboats in the Sulu archipelago, mastering freedive in depths of 30 meters for pearls and fish. Their genetic profile links to mainland Southeast Asian hunter-gatherers like the Chtin and Lubri ethnic groups in Thailand's remote hills, suggesting routes through Vietnam or Borneo. By 10,000 to 8,000 years ago, another pivotal group entered, the Cordilleran ancestors stemming from indigenous Taiwanese foragers, not the later farmers. These were pre-agricultural nomads equipped with bamboo tools, body tattoos for status, and animist beliefs. Modern Cordillerans, including the Igorot, Ifugao, Kankanay, and Bontoc peoples in northern Luzon's Cordillera administrative region, retain the least admixed East Asian DNA globally, sharing genetic components with all Austronesian-speaking populations from Taiwan to Easter Island. This migration challenges the traditional out-of-Taiwan hypothesis, which focused on agricultural expansions. Instead, it was driven by hunter-gatherer movements amid environmental recoveries. Historical events here include the Billing-Allard warming period 14,000 to 12,900 years ago, which made travel easier with milder weather, and the subsequent Younger Dryas Mini-Ice Age, which might have pushed more refugees south. Archaeology supports this. The Peñablanca caves in Cagayan 10,000 years ago yield polished stone tools and early pottery shards, indicating tech upgrades from newcomers. Mixing was gradual and peaceful in many cases. Highland isolation preserved to 90% original genes in Cordillerans, while coastal intermarriages created physical diversity, from the curly-haired Negrito features to straighter-haired East Asian traits. Cultural impacts were profound. The Ifugao's Hudhud and Alim epics, UNESCO-recognized oral masterpieces, narrate heroic migrations and battles with nature, possibly memorializing these arrivals. Tools like ground stone adzes and jade ornaments from Taiwan appear in digs, symbolizing trade networks. This era laid the groundwork for the Philippines' ethnic mosaic, with over 100 groups emerging from these blends. Chapter 4. The Big Austronesian Wave, Rice, Boats, Language, and Society 1000 to 2,500 years ago. This chapter marks the most transformative phase for the majority of modern Filipinos, the Neolithic Revolution in the archipelago. Around 4,000 years ago, during the late Holocene, advanced farmers from southern Taiwan launched southward voyages in sophisticated outrigger canoes, part of the broader Austronesian expansion that would populate one-third of the globe's surface. These migrants brought revolutionary innovations: wet rice agriculture in terraced fields, domesticated animals like pigs, chickens, and dogs, red slip pottery for cooking, and the Austronesian language family, the world's largest, with over 1,200 tongues. Words like mata, I in Tagalog, connecta in Maori, or mata in Malagasy, illustrating this linguistic diaspora. The expansion was rapid. By 3,000 years ago, they reached the Philippines, 500, Indonesia and Malaysia, and eventually, as far as Madagascar 1,500 CE and Hawaii 1,000 CE. DNA shows Austronesian ancestry dominates 66 to 74% in lowland Filipino groups, such as the Tagalogs in Metro Manila, Visayans in Cebu and Bohol, Ilocanos in Ilocos region, and Bicolanos in Bicol Peninsula. Historical events driving this? Climate stability post-Younger Dryas allowed population growth in Taiwan, leading to dispersal, perhaps due to overpopulation or social conflicts. Archaeology. The Lapita culture's cousins left artifacts like the Manungal jar 890-710 BCE in Palawan, a burial motif of symbolizing sea journeys and afterlife beliefs. In the Philippines, they established barangay systems, small village polities led by Datus chiefs, and animist religions with Anitos, ancestor spirits, and Balans shamans. Mixing with locals added layers. Minor Austroasiatic inputs from Vietnam, Cambodia think 10% in some groups via trade, and additional Papuan elements. This boom increased populations from thousands to hundreds of thousands, fostering early chiefdoms. Highland Cordillerans adopted rice terraces built around 2000 BCE per debates, but maintained 50 to 60% pre-Austronesian genes through isolation. Lowland blending created the Malay phenotype often associated with Filipinos: medium build, brown skin, straight hair. Culturally, this wave birthed epics like the Maranao Daranjan or Visayan Hinilawad, recounting godly voyage. Artifacts such as Lingling Ojade earrings, found from Taiwan to Micronesia, represent shared identity. This period's events set the Philippines as a maritime crossroads, influencing everything from cuisine, rice-based, to social structures. Chapter 5. Trade before the Spanish, South Asian, Indian and early Chinese influences 1,000 to 500 years ago. By 1000 CE, the Philippines had evolved to a network of thriving chiefdoms and trade hubs, entering the Iron Age with metal tools and complex societies. This era saw intensified external contacts, shaping genetic diversity through commerce rather than conquest. Key historical event: the rise of Indianized kingdoms in Southeast Asia, like the Srivijaya Empire 7th to 13th century, in Sumatra, which facilitated Indian Ocean trade routes. The Laguna copperplate inscription 9000 CE, discovered in 989 near Manila, is the oldest written document in the Philippines. A Sanskrit-influenced pardon for debts, mentioning places like Java and linking to Hindu-Buddhist influences. South Asian DNA 3-5% enter these traders, particularly affecting southern seafaring groups like the Sama, who adopted Indian spices, textiles, and even words like Raja or Guru, teacher. Simultaneously, Chinese influences surged. The Song dynasty 959 CE and 179 CE from 982 CE describe Maui, Mindoro, as a trade partner, exchanging gold, beeswax, tortoise shells, and slaves for porcelain, silk iron tools, and copper gongs. Fujian merchants, from the same province as many Hong Kong ancestors, established outposts in Manila and Cebu by the 100s. Many settled, intermarrying with locals and introducing Confucianism, Buddhism and technologies like gunpowder, early fireworks, and papermaking. This pre-Spanish-Chinese admixture contributes 5 to 10% to coastal Filipino DNA, laying foundations for later mestizo communities. Another pivotal event, the spread of Islam via the Sultanate of Sulu, 1405 CE, and Maguindanao Puntinians, influenced by Borneo's Brunei and Arab Persian traders. This added minor Middle Eastern genetic traces, 1%, to Moro peoples in Mindanao, like the Maguindanao and Tausug, who developed sultanates with Arabic scripts and mosques. The 1380 Eel of Makdum Karim, an Arab missionary, marks Islam's foothold, blending with animism. Archaeologically, shipwrecks like the Pandan Wreck 15th century off Palawan yield Chinese ceramics, confirming trade volumes. Culturally, this era produced epics like the Tausug Perang Sabil resistance tales and introduced foods like lumpia from Chinese spring rolls. These events fostered a pre-colonial golden age, with polities like the Rajanate of Buchuan Winlanozerwan sending tribute to China, enhancing genetic and cultural fusion. Chapter 6. Spanish colonization and the rise of Chinese mestizos. In 1898, the arrival of Europeans in 1521 marked a seismic shift, blending Old World imperialism with Asian resilience. Ferdinand Magellan's expedition, sponsored by Spain, landed in Cebu on March 16, 1521, leading to the First Mass and the Battle of Mactan, where Lapu-Lapu defeated him on April 27, a symbol of indigenous resistance. Miguel López de Legazpi's mid-1865 conquest established Manila as a colony, initiating 333 years of Spanish rule under the cross and sword. Historical events abound. The Manila Galleon Trade 165.815 connected Manila to Acapulco, Mexico, shipping Chinese silks, spices, and for silver, introducing Latin American crops like corns and chocolate, and minimal Native American DNA, 2%. Spanish DNA itself is sparse. Less than 1% of Filipinos carry European genes, typically 1 to 5% per individual, concentrated in urban elites. Why? Only about 5,000 Spaniards resided in the islands at peak, mostly male soldiers, priests, and officials intermarried with locals or Chinese. The Chinese role exploded here. Facing labor shortages, Spain imported thousands of Sanglis from Fujian, like Hong Kong's roots, for crafts and trade. Key events: the 1603 Chinese uprising in Manila, where 20,000 were massacred after paranoia, another in 1639. Yet, survivors thrived in ghettos like the Parian, marrying Filipinas and birthing Chinese mestizos who dominated the economy by the 1800s, controlling sugar haciendas in Negros, tobacco in Cagayan, and retail in Binondo, oldest Chinatown, 1594. By 1898, mestizos were 10 to 20% of the population. Revolutionary events: the Philippine Revolution 1896 and 1898, sparked by José Rizal's execution on December 30, 1896, Rizal Chinese ancestry via his great-grandfather. Heroes like Andrés Bonifacio Katipunan, founder, and Emilio Aguinaldo, first president, had mestizo networks. The 1898 Spanish-American War ended Spanish rule, but ceded the Philippines to the U.S. for $20 million. Genetically, this era boosted Chinese DNA to 20 to 30% overall, especially in cities. Culturally, it fused fiestas, like Sinulog from Spanish, with Chinese lanterns, creating the mestizo class that led independence. Chapter 7. American period, Japanese occupation and mid-20th century shifts. 19146 The U.S. acquisitions via the 1898 Treaty of Paris ignited the Philippine-American War. 1899-1902, a brutal conflict killing over 200,000 Filipinos through battles and disease. American rule. 1946 introduced public education, English language, infrastructure, roads and schools, and cultural icons like basketball and Hollywood films. Genetic impacts. American soldiers, over 126,000 deployed, fathered Amerindian children, adding 1–2% U.S. European Native American DNA in areas Clark and Subic bases. Events. The Ninang III Pensionado program sent Filipinos to U.S. universities, fostering elite mixes. World War II brought Japanese occupation. 1941–1945. Pearl Harbor, December 1941, led to Dawn invasion. The Death March, April 1940, killed thousands. Liberation came with MacArthur's return, October 1944, and Manila's destruction. 100,000 civilian deaths. Some Japanese soldiers stayed post-war, especially in Davao farms, contributing 1% Japanese DNA but cultural elements like ramen and karate. This era's events accelerated urbanization, mixing rural ethnics with urban mestizos. Chapter 8. Recent changes. The fastest mixing in history. 1946–26 post-independence on July 4, 1946, the Philippines entered an era of rapid globalization, with genetic shifts accelerating through migration, technology, and politics. Key events. The Hukbalahap Rebellion 1946–1954 against landlords displaced rural folk, mixing highland Negritos with lowlanders. Ferdinand Marcos martial law 1911 suppressed dissent but boosted Chinese businesses. His wife Imelda, with Chinese ties, symbolized elite mestizos. The EDSA People Power Revolution, February 22 to 25, 1986, boosted Marcos, ushering democracy and economic liberalization. Chinese influences peaked. Post-1945 Communist China. Waves of Fujianese fled to the Philippines, naturalized in the 1970s under mass naturalization. Today, 135 million pure Chinese Filipinos, and 22 million with partial ancestry. They control 60% of the economy. Think Henry Tsai's SM Malls, John Gokongwei's Robinsons, or Lucio Tan's Jollibee. In Hong Kong terms, it's like Li Ka-shing families but Pinoy style. Urban DNA. 10–20% additional Chinese atop the 36% East Asian baseline. Overseas Filipino workers OFBAUs booms 1974. Marcos labor export policy. 10 million abroad by 2026, remitting $40 billion. Marriages introduce Saudi Arabian, Arab DNA 1%. Hong Kong Chinese, enhancing East Asian, US Canadian, European American 2%, and European mixes. The Korean wave Hallyu. Since 2000s, K-dramas exploded post-2003, Endless Love, leading to 100,000 Koreans in the Philippines by 26. Factories in Laguna and biracial marriages in Pampanga, Cebu add 1–2% Korean DNA, growing fast. Japanese retirees, post-1980s bubble in Tagaytay. Australian expats in Visayas, post-1990s tourism boom. Middle Eastern influx from UAE Qatar jobs since 1980s. Indian IT workers post-2000s. The 2020 COVID-19 pandemic disrupted but accelerated virtual mixing via apps like Tinder. The 2026 University of the Philippines Diliman study, analyzing tens and thousands plus genomes, confirms average Filipino DNA, 73% Southeast Asianian, 36% East Asian Austronesian plus Chinese spikes, face European, 3% Asian, 2% others. In Manila, 40% Chinese, Mindanao, more Papuan South Asian. Siblings vary due to genetic recombination. One might look Negrito dark, another Chinese fair. Climate events. Typhoon Haiyan 2013 displaced millions. Mixes. Rising seas by 2026 threaten Sama communities, pushing inland migrations. DNA testing boom via 23andMe, popular post-2010s, fosters identity pride, with laws like the 1997 Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act protecting Negrito lands. Chapter 9. Conclusion. Embracing our rainbow heritage from the Ice Age Negrito Denisovan blends, through Austronesian voyages, Chinese trades, Spanish revolutions, American wars, and modern global waves, the Filipino story is one of relentless fusion. Historical events, from Magellan's defeat to EDSA's triumph, weren't just politics. They sculpted our DNA, creating over 100 ethnic groups united by resilience. This diversity, like Hong Kong's multicultural vibe, makes Filipinos adaptable globals. Nurses in HK, seafarers worldwide. We're not one race. We're a beautiful, event-forged mosaic, proudly mixed like Halo Hollow with every flavor. Thank you.